Diane Staudte was extremely active in her church.
If church was open, they were going to be there.
And she was a hardworking nurse.
She's the breadwinner in the family.
Her husband, Mark, was a musician.
He just had a passion for music.
Between gigs, he stayed home with the kids.
We called him Mr. Mom.
For years, their unconventional arrangement appeared to work.
It was a home that was filled with love and joy.
But in 2012, their home full of love was ravaged by tragedy.
They said he died of a heart attack.
Her husband's sudden death was only the first in a series of heartbreaks that Diane suffered.
She finds her son dead on the floor.
And 9 months after that, her oldest daughter fell desperately ill too.
It appeared that Sarah was not going to survive.
This is a medical mystery.
But coming so soon after 2 sudden deaths, was it merely a tragic coincidence?
People thought, this poor woman.
Or was this poor woman actually evil?
To believe that something like this could go on in our town, it was shocking.
Springfield, Missouri, June 10th, 2013. It was a spring afternoon in this city of 160,000 on the edge of the Ozarks.
It's a small city, but a great place to raise a family.
We're right in the heart of the Bible Belt here.
51-year-old Diane Staudte certainly had plenty of reasons to pray that afternoon. Her eldest daughter, 24-year-old Sarah Staudte, had fallen gravely ill over the weekend.
Sarah becomes extremely sick. She starts vomiting profusely. She can't keep anything down. And she declines so rapidly that they have to rush her to the emergency room at the hospital.
But once Diane and her middle daughter, 22-year-old Rachel, got Sarah to the ER, the doctors worked frantically to save the 24-year-old.
Doctors and nurses are rushing to try to figure out what's wrong with this 20-something woman who should be in the prime of her health.
They had put Sarah through numerous tests. All the tests were coming back negative, and it was unknown at that point.
Unknown, but dire.
Her body functions are shutting down.
She was not expected to live.
And the doctors had no idea what was causing it.
Why is she dying right in front of us?
Diane appeared every bit as mystified as the doctors.
She tells them she has no idea what has happened to her daughter.
Although that evening, even as her daughter's condition worsened to the point that the doctors put her in the ICU, Diane tried to put on a brave face.
She goes on Facebook and asks everyone to pray for her daughter.
Friends and family wouldn't hesitate to help in any way they could either. They knew that by the time her daughter fell mysteriously ill, Diane had already suffered more than her fair share of tragedy. Born in 1962, Diane Richter grew up in Springfield, the daughter of a devout Lutheran family.
She was very active in church here locally.
And she showed an early knack for music.
She did play keyboards and at least 1 or 2 other instruments.
But despite performing with the church choir, she was a shy, reserved teen.
She just had a very timid, mousy demeanor, did not really say a whole lot.
She never showed any kind of emotions.
In other words, she was a good fit for her conservative hometown.
People like to say it's a place to raise a family, not a fuss. That's what Springfield is.
The Springfield native did leave home briefly, though. Eager to help people, she attended nursing school at a small Lutheran college in Winfield, Kansas, which is also where she met Mark Staudte. 11 years older than Diane, Mark was a military brat who'd grown up all over the world.
My father was in the Air Force, so we moved a lot. When I was 5, Mark's about 4.5 years older. My dad was stationed to Wheelus Air Force Base in Tripoli, Libya. I had a house about 100 yards from the Mediterranean, which was rather cool.
But while his baby brother thought it was cool, the family's nomadic lifestyle was tough on Mark.
He did not adjust to moving as well as I did. He was just not that gregarious, tended to kind of stay into himself.
Although by the time the family returned to the States when he was a teen, Mark had found his voice via music.
He had gotten a guitar, had been learning to play it, and had a great voice, and had written these songs, and they were excellent. So I was thinking, hey, this guy's going to make it someday.
Mark got a degree in communications from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, but decided to pursue his music instead of a career.
He was so passionate about music, very passionate about life. That's Mark. Passionate about anything he does.
And over the next 8 or 9 years, Mark was the frontman for a series of bands.
He was a really excellent singer. He could wow the audience.
And he wowed Diane, too, when they first met in 1985.
They met at a bluegrass festival in Winfield, Kansas.
He was older, seemingly more polished. He knew more of life than Diane did.
And despite their age difference, they married that same year, just months after meeting.
I was the best man at the wedding. It was in Springfield. It was her family church.
The year after the wedding, Diane finished her nursing degree and gave birth to a son, Sean. But the new parents' joy soon gave way to anxiety.
Sean had seizures when he was very young.
And as the little boy grew, other issues surfaced.
He had autism, so that's probably a big concern for the family.
However, that was far from the family's only concern. Settling in suburban Kansas City, Mark found plenty of opportunities to play music, but never found a steady job.
Had the occasional part-time job, tending bar or singing in a band or something along those lines, but never steady income from Mark at all.
Which meant the family depended on Diane and her nursing degree.
She's the breadwinner in the family. She's the one who's really making all the money and works hard.
And the fact that she was the family's main source of income meant she was always on the lookout for a better offer.
Diane switched hospitals on a fairly regular basis for that slight increase in pay.
And even as Diane worked, the family continued to grow. Daughter Sarah was born in 1988 and her sister Rachel in 1990.
Mark was the house husband and look after the kids and play music at night.
Although with Mark only working occasionally, 3 kids was a lot to keep up with. So soon after Rachel was born, the family relocated to Diane's hometown of Springfield, Missouri.
Diane's parents lived in Springfield, so Diane got a job in Springfield, moved the family there.
Mark continued to concentrate on looking after the kids.
He was not really doing anything career-wise.
He did continue to play music, though, forming a new band soon after the family arrived in Springfield.
Well, he was the front man. We carried the music, he carried the entertainment.
Although by then, music was more of a hobby than a career aspiration.
He wasn't trying to make money out of music. He just had a passion for music.
He'd do free shows for any good causes, benefits, play for the schools, the kids. So he's quite involved in the community.
But mostly, he was involved with his kids.
We called him Mr. Mum.
Especially after the couple's youngest daughter was born in 2001.
They had 4 children, the oldest being Sean Staudte. Then it was Sarah Staudte, Rachel Staudte, and then a younger daughter.
And by 2012, after years of working long hours as a nurse, Diane had taken a new job so she could spend more time with her family.
She was a claims handler for a healthcare company.
It also allowed her to become more involved with her church.
She was assistant music director.
Diane and Rachel both played instruments in the church band.
But she was still the family's primary means of support.
She's the one who's putting food on the table, keeping the lights on in the house, keeping the mortgage up. And her husband, every Friday or Saturday, would go out and maybe bring back $50 or $100 from a bar gig.
And while her 3 oldest children were in their 20s, they all still depended on her, too.
Sean with special needs. He worked at Springfield Workshop, which is a organization for children with disabilities that allow them to work.
Oldest daughter Sarah was in college, but she was struggling.
She wasn't the brightest student. She maybe even had some learning disabilities.
She was worried about being able to get her degree.
It was a marked contrast to middle daughter Rachel, who had recently started attending Missouri State's Springfield campus.
Rachel was a very intelligent and artistic young woman.
She was the smartest one, the best student. Her future was boundless, was limitless.
And she was a source of considerable pride for both Diane and Mark.
Rachel was the apple of both of her parents' eyes.
They were a very happy family. That's the way that it looked to me, that it was a home that was filled with love and joy.
But as of Easter that year, their home would be filled with tragedy instead. Coming up, Diane finds her husband unresponsive.
He didn't look after his health as best as he could.
And her son falls gravely ill.
Sean had flu-like symptoms, nausea, he'd been throwing up.
On the afternoon of April 8, 2012, Easter Sunday, 50-year-old Diane Staudte called 911 in her hometown of Springfield, Missouri, with an urgent request for an ambulance.
Diane called the paramedics and said she'd found her husband unresponsive.
And when paramedics arrived on the scene minutes later, they found that 61-year-old Mark Staudte was more than just unresponsive.
They get there and they realize quickly there's nothing they can do. He's been dead for a few hours.
It appeared that he had died while Diane and the children were at church.
They just got home at 12, and she went and checked on him, and he was already dead.
But how had Mark died?
Springfield police talked to Diane Staudte, and she had said, well, he's not been in the best of health.
And according to Diane, he hadn't been feeling well for the last few days.
Mark had flu-like symptoms. He had not been eating. He had been feeling weak and kind of had gone downhill for those few days.
Some of his friends in the band and other people in the community noticed he seemed a little pale, complexion a little sallow.
His skin was kind of a yellowish color. So I told him, I said, man, I need to take you to the doctors.
Mark had ignored the advice.
Mark Staudte was one of those guys, like so many men are. I'm fine, and everything will be okay. I'm just feeling a little under the weather, a little indigestion.
Whatever his illness was, Diane said that on Sunday morning, Mark had refused to get out of bed.
She said that she asked Mark to go to Easter Sunday church.
According to Diane, when he declined, she decided to let her husband rest, a decision she regretted as soon as she got home from church and found him still in bed.
She goes, I shook him first. He didn't move. So I pulled the covers and I shook him again. The minute I touched him, I knew he was dead.
Mark's friends and family were grieved by news of his death, but they weren't necessarily surprised.
He was 60, overweight, bad nutrition, didn't work out.
He didn't look after his health as best as he could.
His lifestyle, smoking, things of that nature that might have contributed to his death.
That was the medical examiner's conclusion.
It was determined that Mark died of natural causes.
They said he died of a heart attack.
No autopsy was done.
Diane had Mark's body cremated.
There's a small private ceremony by Lake Springfield, and his ashes are scattered to the wind.
There was also a larger memorial service at the church, where Diane asked the surviving members of Mark's band to take the lead.
She approached the band and asked if we would perform one of Mark's favorite hymnal songs.
During the service, Diane put on a brave front.
My impression of Diane was that she's trying to be strong for the family.
And once it was over, Diane continued to do the best she could for the family, with a little help from Mark's insurance.
There's about $20,000 that goes to Diane after Mark dies.
It wasn't much, just enough for Diane to move the children out of the house where their father died.
It was in a newer area, and it was also a little bit bigger home than what they were used to.
Diane was making sure their family had a slightly better life after the tragic loss of her husband.
Mark's death hit the couple's youngest daughter hard. She was still in middle school when her father died.
It was very sad. It just was tragic.
21-year-old Rachel, despite the sudden loss of her father, continued to excel at Missouri State University.
Several of her teachers talked about what a wonderful writer she is, how she appreciated the intrinsics of math, how she was able to do art, not just painting or sketching, but 3D art, sculptures, and she did it effortlessly.
Older sister Sarah, who was also a student at Missouri State, continued to struggle though.
Sarah was nice, but not as driven. She wasn't hugely successful in honors and making the dean's roll.
But it was Diane's eldest, her son Sean, who seemed to have the hardest time dealing with his father's death.
Sean Staudte is on Facebook making statements like, well, now my dad's gone and nobody's ever going to remember him. I wonder what's going to happen to me.
The answer came on September 2nd, 5 months after Mark's death, when Diane made another desperate call to 911.
Police were dispatched to the Staudte residence. When they arrived, they find Sean deceased in his bedroom.
And according to Diane, the circumstances were eerily similar to his father's death 5 months earlier.
Sean had flu-like symptoms as well, nausea, he'd been throwing up.
And just like Mark, he'd apparently died while the rest of the family was in church that Sunday morning.
Diane said that she had checked on Sean before she left and he was okay.
When she comes back, she finds her son dead on the floor of his bedroom.
Was there some connection? At first glance, the young man's sudden death certainly appeared to be a mystery.
Here's a man in his mid-20s who should be in the prime of his life, even if he had had the flu.
But was that really the case?
Sean had medical issues, a history of autism.
He had a history of seizures.
It looked as if he might have had one recently, too.
He had blood around his mouth.
Was it evidence of a seizure? That's what the medical examiner believed.
The neuropathologist did find that based upon the findings at the autopsy as well as the history of medical issues, which included seizures, that his death was initially ruled a death by natural causes.
Less than 6 months after Mark's death, friends and family filed into Diane's church for another memorial service.
I liked Sean. He was a quiet kid and a nice kid.
The Staudte family would once again be scattering ashes.
Diane had Sean cremated as well.
And for a second time, Diane and her girls would struggle to move on as best they could after a terrible tragedy.
People thought, she's lost her husband, she's lost her son. This poor woman. It's a good thing that she has the love of her 3 daughters.
Diane also had the support of her church.
Her church family coalesced around her. They were her family to bring her through this time of grief. And it was a source of comfort.
Not just to Diane, either. After the death of her father and brother, middle daughter Rachel also sought solace in religion.
To Diane and Rachel, church seemed to be probably the biggest part of their life. If church was open, they were going to be there and they were going to be involved in it.
Eldest daughter Sarah, on the other hand, threw herself into her studies. And despite years of struggling academically, she finally managed to graduate in 2012.
She had a degree in French.
Sarah's long-hoped-for graduation was one bright spot after a year of tragedy.
She was very proud about going to college and getting her degree. That was something that she's wanted to do for a while.
But while she'd finally gotten her degree, Sarah's struggles were far from over, since there wasn't exactly a big demand for French translators in Southwest Missouri.
Once Sarah graduates college, she's not really sure what she's going to do.
Although that wouldn't be the 24-year-old's biggest worry.
It's not too long after that Sarah starts to not feeling well.
And the symptoms were all too familiar. Coming up, had Sarah attempted suicide?
She's talked about in the past about cutting her wrist.
Or is her mysterious illness no coincidence?
To believe that something like this could go on in our town, it was shocking.
On June 9, 2013, 51-year-old Diane Staudte rushed her daughter Sarah to the hospital in Springfield, Missouri. The 24-year-old had fallen mysteriously and gravely ill.
She is in critical condition. She is this close to dying.
And despite all their best efforts, the doctors had no idea why.
They couldn't figure it out. The doctors didn't know what was going on.
This is a medical mystery.
And if the doctors didn't solve the puzzle in time,
it appeared that Sarah was not going to survive.
Her kidneys may fail. It appears to be that sort of systemic organ failure.
And as devastating as losing a daughter so young might be, it would be the third such tragedy that Diane had suffered in little more than a year.
There had been 2 recent deaths.
Diane's husband, Mark, had died first in April of 2012, the victim of what the medical examiner believed to be a heart attack.
Mark was a little bit overweight, and he was 60.
The death of Diane's son, Sean, who died 5 months after his father, had been just as easy to explain. The 26-year-old had a long history of seizures.
The autopsy determined that he had died of natural causes due to a prior medical situation.
But were the deaths just a terrible coincidence? On June 11th, while Sarah was in the ICU, someone called the police.
They were very alarmed by some things going on in the Staudte family.
The first member of the family dying, I'm sure that everyone was just heartbroken for them. When Sean died, a second member of the same family, I'm sure that there were probably some people wondering how in the world could so much tragedy happen to one family. And then when Sarah became sick, people had to start getting suspicious.
Although suspicion was all that the caller had.
The tip was just simply asking the police to look into the deaths as well as what is happening with Sarah.
Was there some connection? It was up to Springfield Police Detective Neil McAmis to figure it out.
The first thing I did was to go back and locate the reports in reference to Mark's passing along with Sean's.
And what the detective found was alarming.
There was a lot of similarities in such a short time period for these people to becoming so ill. And then with the 2 passings, that it definitely raised some red flags.
But if that was true, why hadn't anyone noticed 9 months earlier when Sean died?
Part of it may have been that the deaths occurred at 2 different homes. Unless you really knew the family or knew the last name or had been on both calls, there'd be no way to really link them together.
And if the similar symptoms and circumstances surrounding Mark and Sean's deaths were troubling, what the investigators heard when they went to the hospital was equally disturbing.
They find some suspicious nurses and some suspicious doctors who say, Diane Staudte is acting strange.
Diane's not really being too concerned.
Rather than her daughter's condition, Diane's biggest concern seemed to be her upcoming summer vacation.
Diane had spoken about going on vacation regardless of whether Sarah was better or not.
Was Diane simply putting on a brave face?
Some people say, well, she's a nurse, she's used to death, and you have to laugh to get through terrible things in life.
Or had she already written her daughter off as dead?
She seemed so incredibly cold and indifferent to what was happening.
Whatever the reason for Diane's nonchalance, the fact that she was a trained nurse did raise a chilling possibility.
Diane, being a nurse, she might have knowledge of something that could have been done to these people.
It was a suspicion Sarah's doctor shared.
The doctor suspected that it was a possible poisoning.
Could the wife and mother really have murdered her husband, son, and potentially her daughter? It was almost too much for the detectives.
That something like this could go on in our town, it was shocking.
Just hard to understand how a mother could do that.
And as hard as it was to believe, it might be even harder to prove. Mark and Sean had both been cremated, and finding traces of poison in Sarah's system would be difficult.
Sarah's body had been purged of pretty much everything and trying to get her back to life.
There was one possibility, however.
With Diane Staudte, they did do an autopsy, and they saved tissue samples.
So after consulting with Sarah's doctors about her symptoms, the investigators contacted the medical examiner's office and asked for a new analysis of the samples from Sean's autopsy.
The doctor thought it was some type of heavy metal or possibly arsenic poisoning, but he did not know.
And even as the investigators waited for the medical examiner's office to track down the samples for testing, they received some welcome news.
Sarah Staudte starts to get better.
She made a miraculous recovery.
But while she was no longer in danger of dying, she remained seriously ill.
I was able to speak with her a couple times, but due to the condition that she was in, it was difficult to get information from her.
So on June 20th, 10 days after she'd first rushed Sarah to the hospital, the investigators decided it was time to talk to Diane.
They asked her to come into the police headquarters to answer some questions. She agreed to do that. She drove herself to police headquarters.
I appreciate you being willing to come down and speak with us. We're very helpful on your part.
I'm trying to be.
Diane was very calm. She was extremely calm.
Even when it became clear that the investigators suspected some connection between Sarah's sudden illness and the deaths of her son and husband.
She said that she had tried to come up with all these different theories. She discussed, her nursing background and what could have happened.
So this is as much of a medical mystery to you as it is for the doctors and what you're saying.
Yeah. I have no clue.
Although she did hint that Sarah's illness might have been self-inflicted.
She's talked about in the past about cutting her wrist.
She opened suggesting that it may have been a suicide.
I've been kind of putting pressure on her to, you need to get out and get a job. Your college bills are coming due.
She has this mountain of student debt.
Debts that Diane didn't want to be stuck with.
After all, you get tired of doing everything for your kids, and it's like you need to step up and do it.
But if Sarah had attempted suicide, Diane said she didn't know how her daughter had done it.
As far as pills, I don't have much. Other, Tylenol, Motrin, that type of stuff. But
anything else maybe besides pills or that she could do?
Well, if she got into like cleaners and stuff like that, but I don't know. I can't really picture her doing that.
However, there was one last possibility.
There's antifreeze.
It's a poison. It is not an immediate death, but it can be a death over a several-day period.
We had been arguing, and she got really mad at me. And I told her, for all the stuff that you've put me through, blah, 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 blah. And I think she went out in the garage.
But if Sarah had tried to commit suicide, why had her father and brother both died under such similar circumstances? According to Diane, it was because they'd all been drinking antifreeze.
How'd you know they were drinking antifreeze, Diane?
They told me.
Had Diane's husband, son, and daughter all committed suicide? The investigators were skeptical.
You and I both know why you knew they were drinking antifreeze.
And it didn't have a thing to do with suicide.
You knew, Diane, that they were drinking antifreeze because you were giving it to them.
And I didn't know what else to do.
Diane did confess. It was a several-hour-long interview, but she did end up confessing.
She confessed to the murder of her husband.
Who's the first person that you killed?
Mark.
Then she told the police she'd poisoned her son, Sean.
How many days was it that you started giving him the antifreeze before he died?
Maybe a couple of days.
Just a couple days?
And she admitted to the attempt on Sarah's life, too.
Are you surprised she was able to pull through?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By the end of the interview, the investigators had heard more than enough. They placed Diane under arrest.
If you can stand up for us, we're going to have to put some handcuffs on you. We're not going to put them on tight, but I've had you put your hands on your head.
Formalities.
Yeah, it is.
The investigators had a confession. But had it come too easily? Was it possible there was someone Diane was trying to protect? Coming up, the investigators uncover a new twist.
Do you recognize this?
The journal was written several months before Mark and Sean were killed.
But where will it point them?
This just wasn't Mom involved.
By the morning of June 21st, 2013, it had been several hours since Diane Staudte had confessed to poisoning 3 members of her family.
You expected the antifreeze to, after they drank it, that it would be quick and it would kill them right away.
I really don't know why she decided to confess. Maybe she was worried about what everybody else was going to think. She was so heavily involved in church.
Whatever Diane's reason for confessing, that morning, the Springfield, Missouri authorities charged the 51-year-old mother of 4 with 2 counts of murder. One was for the April 2012 death of her husband, Mark. The other for poisoning her son, Sean, 5 months later.
It was just so bizarre for a woman to kill her own family in such an awful way.
She was also charged with the attempted murder of her daughter, Sarah Staudte. The 24-year-old managed to survive the attempt on her life, but remained seriously ill.
Sarah Staudte's in the hospital for a long time.
News of Diane's arrest took family and friends by surprise.
I was shocked. I was shocked because she was the widow. I mean, she was the victim. She played it.
I thought, how could this be? This is the picture-perfect family. Everything, there was no indications of any darkness or sinister activities.
However, no one appeared more shocked than Sarah's younger sister, 22-year-old Rachel Staudte. With her older sister still incapacitated and her younger sister still a minor, the investigators figured that Rachel was their chance for a witness who could give them insight into the family situation.
Rachel was the crown jewel of the family. She was the smartest one.
But when the investigators brought Rachel in for a statement shortly after her mother's arrest, Diane's middle daughter completely broke down.
God. It's a lot to process. I don't even know how you actually process that, to be honest with you, Rachel.
Oh, God.
Rachel's statement was a bust, but the search of the family's home that same day did produce a surprising piece of evidence, one that would send the investigation in a new and entirely unexpected direction. What the investigators found was a handwritten journal, and one entry immediately caught their eye.
The journal was written in June of 2011, several months before Mark and Sean were killed.
And as the investigators explained to Diane when they brought her in for another round of questioning, the contents of that journal entry were explosive.
It's sad when I realize how my father will pass on in the next 2 months, and how Sean, my brother, will move on shortly after.
One of Diane's daughters knew that she planned to poison Mark and Sean. But which one?
We both know this is Rachel's writing.
This just wasn't Mom involved.
Did she put any antifreeze into their drinks as well?
No,
It was only you.
just me.
But was that true? Or was Diane merely covering for her daughter?
Diane was never going to roll on her daughter. She was never going to give Rachel up.
The investigators weren't about to give up either. In fact, even as they talked to Diane, the investigators brought Rachel in for questioning too. Although, rather than confront her directly, They started out treating her as a witness.
Did you ever have any suspicions about anything when your dad and brother and sister got sick?
In hindsight now, yeah. I mean, now that I think on it, yes, but God. It's hard to even imagine something like that.
It was a good act. It might even have fooled the investigators if it weren't for one thing.
Do you recognize this?
And I did confront her with the evidence of the journal.
What is that?
Little journal thing.
A journal thing? Whose journal?
Mine.
Your journal?
Rachel owned up to writing the journal entries, but that wasn't all that she admitted.
I talked to Mom about it, and she mentioned she was thinking of hurting them.
And she'd asked for Rachel's help.
Apparently, Diane Staudte and Rachel Staudte did a lot of research on the best ways to kill people.
Mainly, she was looking for poison.
Rachel was doing a lot of this research at Missouri State University on her school computer.
Basically, went through different options. Was trying to find things that wouldn't be traceable, or at least would be hard to trace.
And eventually, they'd settled on antifreeze.
Why was antifreeze decided?
Because in general, you could put it in something and you couldn't taste it.
Antifreeze is largely odorless, tasteless. If you can put it in soda, it'll do the trick.
In addition to detailing how they'd administered the poison, Rachel also explained her mother's motive for the murders, starting with the death of her father.
Dad was basically a drain on her.
I could see Diane being very resentful of having to support the family.
Rachel said that Diane resented her son, Sean, too.
She would just go on and on about him just being a burden, basically.
And according to her daughter, Diane also had little patience for her son's autism.
And she described him as being worse than a pest.
I mean, he did have some annoying quirks.
And once Diane had gotten rid of Sean, Sarah was next on her list.
She wasn't going anywhere with her life, and that, can't remember any other specific things, but just a general frustration and something needs to be done.
She had these student loans, and the student loans needed to be paid, but she hadn't gotten a job.
She was very adamant on that Sarah was just a burden, that Sarah needed to be taken care of.
And by taken care of, I mean...
She means...
killed.
Yeah.
And every step of the way, Rachel had willingly gone along with her mother's plan.
Rachel Staudte was always her mom's favorite. And without the obstacles of a brother or an older sister or a dad who's in the way, all of those stressors are gone.
Whatever Rachel's motivation, her confession was more than enough for the authorities to place her under arrest.
We did file felony charges against Rachel that mirrored what was filed against Diane: 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of first-degree assault, and 1 count of armed criminal action.
Though her confession didn't make Diane's deadly plot any easier to comprehend.
But it was just hard to understand how a mother could do that, but then to also recruit her daughter, and how either of them could be involved in something so terrible. It was evil.
Coming up, will Rachel turn on her mother at trial?
She almost had to have been driven at some level by Diane.
And if so, what will her betrayal cost Diane?
The prosecutor demanded the death penalty.
On January 21, 2016, Diane Staudte was in a Springfield, Missouri courtroom. It had been 2.5 years since the 53-year-old mother of 4 was arrested for the murders of her husband, Mark, and her son, Sean, as well as the attempt on her daughter, Sarah's life. According to Diane's confession, she'd poisoned all 3 with antifreeze.
Because of Sean's autopsy, there were tissue samples that were saved, and they were able to go back later on and discover the antifreeze crystals on his brain.
It caused a lot of questions within the community of how could anyone do this? How does something like this happen here in Springfield?
Even more difficult for the community to comprehend, Diane's daughter, Rachel, had also been charged with the murders and the attempted murder of her sister.
Rachel, I cannot envision being evil. I thought she almost had to have been driven at some level by Diane.
And based on how they handled the case against the 25-year-old, the prosecutors clearly considered her mother the mastermind, too.
They gave Rachel Staudte a deal, and she eagerly took it.
She did agree to testify on behalf of the state.
Testimony that could have cost her mother dearly.
The prosecutor demanded the death penalty for Diane Staudte.
But as it turned out, Rachel would never take the stand against her mother. Diane wasn't in court to stand trial.
She takes a deal as well. The prosecutor takes death penalty off the table, and Diane Staudte agrees that she's a murderer.
In exchange for her plea, Diane received a life sentence.
She is not eligible for probation or parole.
She will die in prison.
Diane showed no emotion when the sentence was handed down.
She does not say anything. She sits there.
And her silence only made the horrible crime she committed that much harder to understand.
Diane appeared normal and then find out that there was evil lurking in the shadows.
The harder she works and the more money she makes, the more she sees it just going out the door, to student loan debts, to feeding the 5 other mouths in her family. And she just can't get ahead. It's almost sad, right up until you get to the antifreeze part.
See that? That was amazing. I love this.
The crisp, clean air of Springfield, Missouri, on a day in early June of 2013, bore little resemblance to the sinister undercurrents that had, for months, quietly seeped into the fabric of a seemingly ordinary family's life. Springfield, a city of 160,000 souls, nestled comfortably on the verdant edge of the majestic Ozarks, projected an image of serene Midwestern charm, a bastion of traditional values and communal stability. It was, as many residents proudly affirmed, a small city, but a great place to raise a family. This sentiment, a pervasive and comforting mantra, echoed the profound sense of security and moral uprightness that defined this particular corner of what was affectionately known as the Bible Belt. Here, faith was often a visible and guiding principle, deeply woven into the daily existence of its citizens. At the very heart of this community, outwardly embodying its most cherished virtues, resided Diane Staudte, a 51-year-old woman whose life appeared to be a testament to diligent work and unwavering spiritual devotion. Diane Staudte was extremely active in her church. The words painted a picture of piety and commitment. If church was open, they were going to be there. This was not a casual affiliation. It was a deeply ingrained lifestyle, a profound dedication that permeated every aspect of her being. Beyond her profound spiritual commitment, Diane was a fiercely hard-working nurse, a profession often lauded for its compassionate care and selfless dedication. In her household, This dedication translated into a vital economic role. She's the breadwinner in the family. This fact, while perhaps unremarkable to many, subtly underscored a specific power dynamic within her domestic sphere. Her husband, Mark, 11 years her senior, presented a starkly different, yet seemingly complementary persona. Mark was, by nature and by calling, a musician. His life was a melodic tapestry woven with fervent artistic pursuit. He just had a passion for music. This passion, a vibrant, almost ethereal thread, contrasted sharply with Diane's pragmatic, earthy existence. Between his numerous musical engagements, local gigs that punctuated the evenings and weekends, Mark embraced an unconventional, yet deeply cherished role within their household. Between gigs, he stayed home with the kids. His affectionate moniker, uttered with fondness by those who knew him best, offered a glimpse into his gentle, nurturing presence. We called him Mr. Mom. For many years, this distinctive and unconventional arrangement of roles and responsibilities, one where traditional gender expectations were subtly yet effectively subverted, appeared to function with a seamless, harmonious rhythm. Their home, outwardly perceived by neighbors and friends, was a sanctuary of contentment. It was a home that was filled with love and joy, a common refrain among those who observed the Staudte family. It bespoke an idyll, a harmonious domestic landscape where children thrived under the watchful, loving care of both parents, even if their roles diverged from societal norms. But this idyllic facade, so carefully constructed and deeply believed, began to unravel with terrifying swiftness in the fateful year of 2012. What began as an isolated sorrow swiftly metastasized into an epidemic of loss that ravaged their home, shattering the illusion of contentment. In 2012, their home full of love was ravaged by tragedy. The first devastating blow struck in April, when Mark, the vibrant, music-loving father, unexpectedly passed away. They said he died of a heart attack. His sudden, inexplicable death, a seemingly cruel twist of fate, sent ripples of shock and sorrow through the community and, most profoundly, through his immediate family. This was, however, tragically, only the first in a series of heartbreaks that Diane suffered. The words conveyed a sense of relentless, almost biblical misfortune. Just a few short months later, in September, an even more crushing blow fell upon beleaguered mother. She finds her son dead on the floor. The raw brutality of this discovery, the visceral trauma of finding one's own child lifeless, one would naturally assume, test the very limits of human endurance. And yet, the relentless tide of suffering continued to surge. And 9 months after that, her oldest daughter fell desperately ill too. The grim progression was undeniable, relentless, terrifying. Sarah's illness was of such profound and alarming severity that it appeared that Sarah was not going to survive. This grim concatenation of events, a chilling trifecta of inexplicable death and life-threatening illness, naturally sparked profound medical bewilderment. This is a medical mystery, was the immediate collective professional assessment. However, the eerie timing, the alarming proximity of these seemingly disparate tragedies could not be dismissed as mere happenstance. The fact that Sarah's life-threatening ailment arrived, coming so soon after 2 sudden deaths, compelled a more skeptical and critical reevaluation of the unfolding narrative. Was it indeed merely a tragic coincidence? Or did something far more sinister, far more deliberate, underpin this horrifying series of misfortunes? The community, initially gripped by profound sympathy, collectively shook their heads in bewildered sorrow, murmuring, "People thought this poor woman." The sheer weight of such sorrow, visited upon one individual, seemed an unbearable burden, garnering immense empathy and concern. Yet, as the whispers grew louder, as the unsettling patterns became more evident, an alternative, chilling question began to emerge from the shadowed corners of public consciousness. Or was this poor woman actually evil? The very notion was a terrifying affront to their sense of community, their deeply ingrained belief in the goodness of their neighbors. To believe that something like this could go on in our town, it was shocking. It challenged their foundational convictions, tearing at the comforting fabric of their moral assumptions. The narrative abruptly, almost clinically, shifts to a pivotal moment. Springfield, Missouri, June 10, 2013. It was a spring afternoon in the city of 160,000 on the edge of the Ozarks, a city whose quaint charm concealed a shocking underbelly of darkness that day. This community, profoundly rooted right in the heart of the Bible Belt here, often found solace and strength in collective prayer and unwavering faith. 51-year-old Diane Staudte, a woman whose life had outwardly mirrored these communal values, certainly had a wealth of profound and urgent reasons to turn to fervent prayer that afternoon, perhaps more so than anyone could truly comprehend. Her eldest daughter, 24-year-old Sarah Staudte, had fallen critically, gravely ill over the preceding weekend. Sarah's health had inexplicably and terrifyingly deteriorated with shocking rapidity. Sarah becomes extremely sick. She starts vomiting profusely. She can't keep anything down. The violent and relentless nature of her symptoms, a brutal assault on her youthful vitality, left her profoundly weakened. Her rapid and terrifying decline forced a desperate and immediate measure. She declined so rapidly that they have to rush her to the emergency room at the hospital. Upon arrival at the emergency room, the grim, unfolding drama within the sterile, brightly lit environment was one of frantic, desperate medical intervention. Diane and her middle daughter, 22-year-old Rachel, had brought Sarah to the precipice of medical crisis, where dedicated doctors and nurses immediately launched into a frantic, arduous battle to preserve the life of the 24-year-old. Doctors and nurses are rushing to try to figure out what's wrong with this 20-something woman who should be in the prime of her health. The medical staff, accustomed to grappling with life and death, found themselves confronted with a confounding enigma, a baffling illness that defied immediate diagnosis. They subjected Sarah to a battery of numerous tests, each designed to pinpoint the elusive cause of her catastrophic decline. Yet, with each agonizing hour that passed, a frustrating and deeply concerning pattern emerged. All the tests were coming back negative, and it was unknown at that point. This medical mystery, cloaked in ambiguity and scientific uncertainty, was not merely perplexing. It was unequivocally dire. Sarah's robust bodily functions, designed for vitality, were progressively failing. Her body functions are shutting down. She was not expected to live. The grim prognosis hung heavy in the sterile air, a palpable sense of impending doom. And to the utter dismay and profound bewilderment of the medical professionals, the doctors had no idea what was causing it. Why is she dying right in front of us? The raw, unanswered question echoed the depth of their collective helplessness, a desperate plea for an explanation in the face of such inexplicable human suffering. Diane, observing the escalating medical crisis from a carefully maintained distance, outwardly appeared every bit as mystified as the doctors. Her demeanor, calm and seemingly bewildered, mirrored the baffled expressions of the medical professionals, projecting an image of shared incomprehension. She tells them she has no idea what has happened to her daughter. This statement, offered with an air of concerned innocence, was readily accepted by medical staff initially. Yet, even as Sarah's condition tragically worsened, inexorably driving doctors to place her in the highly monitored intensive care unit, Diane consciously attempted to project a facade of brave, resilient hope. That very evening, with her daughter teetering on the precipice of death, Diane tried to put on a brave face. Her public actions, meticulously orchestrated, reinforced this image of the suffering, yet resilient mother. She goes on Facebook and asks everyone to pray for her daughter. This seemingly heartfelt plea for communal prayer, widely shared among her extensive network of friends and church acquaintances, served to solidify her persona as a woman enduring unbearable tragedy, deserving of widespread empathy and spiritual support. Indeed, friends and family, observing Diane's public pronouncements and enduring tribulations, would have instantly and unhesitatingly pledged to help in any way they could, either. Their empathetic response was predicated upon a profound and widely held understanding. By the time her eldest daughter had fallen mysteriously and critically ill, Diane had already suffered what seemed to be far more than her fair share of tragedy, a cascade of misfortunes that would have crushed a lesser individual. Born Diane Richter in 1962, she had spent her formative years growing up in Springfield, Missouri, firmly embedded within a devout Lutheran family. This upbringing indelibly shaped her public persona. She was very active in church here locally. Her spiritual commitment was not merely nominal. It was an integral part of her identity, influencing her community perception. Beyond her faith, she displayed an early, subtle aptitude for music. She did play keyboards and at least one or two other instruments, a quiet talent cultivated within the sanctity of her church. Yet, despite her musical involvement and her participation in the church choir, her teenage years were marked by profound shyness, a reserved and inwardly focused disposition. She just had a very timid, mousy demeanor, did not really say a whole lot. Her emotional expression was notably muted. She never showed any kind of emotions. This quiet, unassuming temperament, this disciplined emotional reticence, was in many ways a good fit for her conservative hometown. Springfield, after all, nurtured a specific kind of societal expectation. People like to say it's a place to raise a family, not a fuss. That's what Springfield is. Diane, in her reserved demeanor and unwavering piety, seemingly embodied this foundational community ideal, a pillar of understated rectitude. The Springfield native did, however, briefly venture beyond the comforting confines of her hometown, drawn by an innate desire to serve and assist others. Eager to help people, she attended nursing school at a small Lutheran college in Winfield, Kansas. This vocational choice, deeply aligned with altruistic motives, underscored her public image of selfless compassion. It was at this modest institution, away from the familiar strictures of Springfield, that she encountered Mark Staudte, a man who would dramatically alter the course of her meticulously planned life. Mark, a full 11 years older than Diane, was a self-proclaimed military brat whose formative years had been mosaic of transit postings, having grown up all over the world. His younger brother painted a vivid, yet nuanced, picture of their nomadic childhood. My father was in the Air Force, so we moved a lot. When I was 5, Mark's about 4.5 years older. My dad was stationed to Wheelus Air Force Base in Tripoli, Libya. The exotic backdrop of their youth was undeniable. I had a house about 100 yards from the Mediterranean, which was rather cool. Yet, while this adventurous existence was perceived as cool by his younger sibling, the ceaseless rhythm of relocation proved to be far more challenging, far more isolating for Mark. He did not adjust to moving as well as I did. He was just not that gregarious, tended to kind of stay into himself. This quieter, more introverted disposition, a contrast to his later persona, hinted at an underlying sensitivity, perhaps a lingering vulnerability shaped by a childhood of constant upheaval. Despite the inherent challenges of their nomadic existence, by the time Mark's family ultimately returned to the United States when he was a teenager, he had discovered a powerful, transformative outlet for his burgeoning self-expression, music. It was through this artistic medium that he not only found his distinctive voice, but also began to forge a new identity, one that resonated with passion and creativity. He had gotten a guitar, had been learning to play it, had a great voice, and had written these songs, and they were excellent. The raw talent and innate charisma were undeniable, deeply impressing his younger brother. So I was thinking, hey, this guy's going to make it someday. A hopeful premonition of artistic success. Mark subsequently earned a degree in communications from the prestigious University of Missouri, Kansas City. However, confronted with a choice between a conventional career path and the siren song of his artistic passion, he unequivocally decided to pursue his music instead of career. This decision, driven by an unyielding internal force, spoke volumes about his profound commitment to his craft. He was so passionate about music, very passionate about life. That's Mark, passionate about anything he does. This boundless enthusiasm, this vibrant embrace of all aspects of existence, was a defining characteristic of his adult persona. Over the course of the next 8 or 9 years, Mark became the charismatic frontman for a series of bands. His powerful stage presence and exceptional vocal talent captivating audiences. He was a really excellent singer. He could wow the audience. And it was his captivating presence, this magnetic charm, that wowed Diane, too, when they first met in 1985. Their initial encounter took place at a vibrant bluegrass festival in Winfield, Kansas, an event pulsating with the very music that defined Mark. He was older, radiating an aura of experience and sophistication that must have seemed intensely alluring to the reserved Diane. He was older, seemingly more polished. He knew more of life than Diane did. Despite the inherent age difference and the striking contrasts in their temperaments, their connection was swift and profound, leading to marriage that very same year, a mere few months after their serendipitous meeting. Mark's brother, a proud participant in the ceremony, fondly recalled, "I was the best man at the wedding. It was in Springfield. It was her family church." The event, anchored in Diane's hometown and within the sacred walls of her family church, seemed to blend their disparate worlds into a cohesive, if ultimately complex, union. The year immediately following their wedding, a period typically brimming with profound life changes, saw Diane successfully complete her demanding nursing degree, a professional milestone that equipped her with vital, marketable skills. Almost concurrently with her academic achievement, she gave birth to their first child, a son whom they named Sean. This initial arrival, a profound source of universal joy, soon became interwoven with an underlying thread of anxiety, introducing unforeseen challenges into their burgeoning family life. But the new parents' joy soon gave way to anxiety. Sean had seizures when he was very young. This early medical complication cast an immediate shadow over their nascent parenthood. As the little boy steadily grew from infancy into early childhood, additional, complex developmental issues gradually surfaced. He had autism, so that's probably a big concern for the family. The diagnosis of autism, a significant developmental challenge, understandably introduced a profound and pervasive layer of ongoing concern and added responsibility for the Staudte family, shifting their domestic dynamic in unexpected ways. However, Sean's complex medical needs were, tragically, far from being the family's sole or most significant concern. Having settled in the sprawling suburbs of Kansas City, Mark found ample opportunities to actively pursue his passion for music, regularly performing at local venues. But this artistic pursuit, however fulfilling, never translated into a steady or reliably consistent source of income. Had the occasional part-time job, attending bar or singing in a band or something along those lines, but never steady income from Mark at all. This persistent lack of stable employment meant that the family's economic security, and indeed their very livelihood, became increasingly dependent on Diane and her arduous work as a highly trained nurse, which meant the family depended on Diane and her nursing degree. She's the breadwinner in the family. She's the one who's really making all the money and works hard. This inherent reality, this unequal distribution of financial responsibility, silently yet steadily, began to lay the groundwork for potential resentment within their marriage, even if it remained unspoken for a time. The fact that she was the family's main source of income also necessitated a perpetual vigilance for career advancement And the fact that she was the family's main source of income meant she was always on the lookout for a better offer. Diane switched hospitals on a fairly regular basis for that slight increase in pay. This pattern of job hopping, while financially prudent, reflected a deeper stress of constant financial burden and a relentless pursuit of economic stability. And even as Diane relentlessly pursued her demanding nursing career, tirelessly navigating the complexities of her profession, the family continued to expand. Their first daughter, Sarah, was born in 1988, followed swiftly by her younger sister, Rachel, in 1990. This burgeoning family, now numbering 5 souls, met Mark's role as a house husband intensified. Mark was a house husband and looked after the kids and played music at night. However, with Mark only working occasionally and pursuing his music, managing 3 young children, particularly with Sean's special needs, was an overwhelming undertaking for a single parent. Although with Mark only working occasionally, 3 kids was a lot to keep up with. The sheer logistical and emotional demands of childcare likely strained the family's resources and dynamics. Consequently, soon after Rachel's birth, a strategic and pivotal decision was made. The family relocated to Diane's familiar hometown of Springfield, Missouri. So soon after Rachel was born, the family relocated to Diane's hometown of Springfield, Missouri. Diane's parents lived in Springfield, so Diane got a job in Springfield, moved the family there. This move was a pragmatic decision, driven by Diane's deep-seated need for both family support and continued employment. Mark, for his part, continued to concentrate almost exclusively on looking after the children, a role he seemingly cherished and embraced. Mark continued to concentrate on looking after the kids. He was not really doing anything. Career-wise, his professional aspirations remained firmly rooted in music. He did, indeed, continue to actively play music, forming a new band soon after the family's arrival in Springfield, eager to reestablish his artistic outlet within this new community. He was a frontman. We carried the music. He carried entertainment. Yet by then, the harsh realities of raising a family and the relentless pursuit of financial stability had, subtly yet inexorably, begun to reshape Mark's musical ambitions. Music, for him, had slowly but steadily transitioned from a full-time, consuming career aspiration to a deeply cherished, perhaps somewhat more pragmatic, hobby. Although by then, music was more of a hobby than a career aspiration. He wasn't trying to make money out of music. He just had a passion for music. This profound love for music was not entirely self-serving. It extended outward into the community. He'd do free shows for any good causes, benefits, play for the schools, the kids. This generous contribution of his talent made him a well-liked and respected figure in Springfield, enriching the lives of others, often for no monetary gain. So he's quite involved in the community. But above all and most consistently, his deepest involvement was unequivocally with his children. But mostly, he was involved with his kids. His enduring nickname, Mr. Mom, resonated with profound accuracy, encapsulating his unwavering dedication to his offspring, a role he continued to embrace, especially after the couple's youngest daughter was born in 2001. The Staudte family had, by this point, grown to a formidable size of 6, encompassing Mark and Diane and their 4 children, each with their own unique needs and developmental stages. They had 4 children, the oldest being Sean Staudte. Then it was Sarah Staudte, Rachel Staudte, and then a younger daughter. This expansion of their family, while a source of potential joy, also significantly amplified the already existing financial and emotional pressures on Diane, the primary breadwinner. By 2012, after enduring years of relentless, long hours as a dedicated nurse, Diane, with a conscious effort to realign her priorities, had taken on a new, less physically demanding job. This strategic career shift allowed her to devote more precious time and energy to her increasingly complex family life. She was a claims handler for a healthcare company. This new role not only offered professional change, but also facilitated a deeper engagement with her cherished spiritual community. It also allowed her to become more involved with her church. She was assistant music director. In this capacity, her musical talents, previously understated, found a renewed outlet. Diane and Rachel both played instruments in the church band. This shared musical endeavor subtly hinted at a strong bond between mother and middle daughter, a connection that would later take on profoundly dark implications. Yet, despite her involvement in church activities and her less strenuous job, the unyielding reality of her financial responsibilities persisted. She remained, unequivocally, the family's primary means of support. She's the one who's putting food on the table, keeping the lights on in the house, keeping the mortgage up. The relentless pressures of maintaining this economic stability were omnipresent, and while her husband, Mark, would occasionally contribute a modest sum to the family coffers, gleaned from his sporadic musical gigs, his income was by no means substantial, and her husband, every Friday or Saturday, would go out and maybe bring back $50 or $100 from a bar gig. This disparity in financial contribution, this quiet imbalance, was a continuous, subtle source of tension that underlay the apparent domestic harmony. Furthermore, Diane's 3 oldest children, though well into their 20s, continued to depend heavily upon her unwavering financial and emotional support, prolonging her deep-seated sense of being the sole provider. Sean, her eldest son, faced profound developmental challenges. Sean with special needs. He worked at Springfield Workshop, which is an organization for children with disabilities that allow them to work, while his employment provided him with purpose and a measure of independence. It was not designed to make him fully self-sufficient, thereby perpetuating Diane's role as his primary caregiver and financial supporter. Oldest daughter, Sarah, herself a college student, found herself grappling with profound academic difficulties, further adding to Diane's mounting burdens. Oldest daughter, Sarah, was in college, but she was struggling. She wasn't the brightest student. She may have even had some learning disabilities. Her academic struggles exacerbated her worries and amplified the family's financial strain. She was worried about being able to get her degree. This academic vulnerability presented a marked contrast to middle daughter, Rachel, who had recently commenced her studies at Missouri State's Springfield campus, exhibiting a formidable academic prowess that was a source of undeniable pride. Rachel was a very intelligent and artistic young woman. She was the smartest one, the best student. Her future was boundless, was limitless. Her intellectual brilliance and artistic talents distinguish her, making her a beacon of hope and achievement within the Staudte family. And she was a source of considerable pride for both Diane and Mark. Rachel was the apple of both of her parents' eyes. This overt favoritism, while perhaps outwardly appearing harmless, harbored subtle yet profound psychological implications for the familial dynamics, potentially creating rifts and resentments among the siblings. For a time, however, from an external perspective, the Staudte family presented a picture of cohesive domestic happiness. They're a very happy family. That's the way it looked to me, that it was a home that was filled with love and joy. The carefully constructed facade of contentment, however, would soon be brutally torn away by an unfolding sequence of horrors, revealing the toxic resentments simmering beneath the surface. But with a sudden, devastating shift in their seemingly harmonious existence. As of Easter that year, their home will be inexorably filled with tragedy instead. This ominous foreshadowing brought the previous segment to a close, paving the way for the full unfolding of the Staudte family's descent into a bewildering, terrifying spiral of death and illness. The chilling question lingered, almost an unbearable suspense. Was this fate, this crushing succession of heartbreaks, truly random, or did something far more sinister, a premeditated malice, orchestrate their doom? The words, coming up, Diane finds her husband unresponsive. He didn't look after his health as best as he could, and her. Son falls gravely ill. Sean had flu-like symptoms. Nausea he'd been throwing up only served to intensify the dark anticipation, setting the stage for the unveiling of horrors that would shake the very foundations of Springfield's perception of itself. The psychological analyst begins to discern a pattern, the narrative rhythm shifting from introduction to the harrowing specifics of crimes. On the fateful afternoon of April 8th, 2012, a day marked as Easter Sunday, 50-year-old Diane Staudte made a desperate and urgent call to emergency services, 911, from her seemingly tranquil hometown of Springfield, Missouri. Her voice, outwardly strained by a feigned panic, conveyed an immediate and pressing request for an ambulance. Diane called the paramedics and said she'd found her husband unresponsive. This plea for medical assistance, seemingly born of distress, ushered in the first official interaction with the nascent, dark events that would soon consume her family. When paramedics, responding with professional alacrity, arrived at the Staudte residence mere minutes later, the grim reality they discovered was far more profound than simply an unresponsive husband. They found 61-year-old Mark Staudte irrevocably beyond any medical intervention. They get there and they realize quickly there's nothing they can do. He's been dead for a few hours. This chilling pronouncement indicated that Mark had passed away some time prior to the call, casting an immediate shadow of doubt over Diane's timeline. The initial assessment suggested a timing that was almost too convenient, almost too neat. It appeared that he had died while Diane and the children were at church. Her narrative presented a picture of blameless discovery. They just got home at 12, and she went and checked on him, and he was already dead. The scene was outwardly a tragedy. But the paramount question that immediately arose in the minds of the initial responders, and later the authorities, was stark and urgent. How, precisely, had Mark Staudte died? Springfield police officers, in their preliminary investigation, engaged Diane Staudte in a conversation designed to glean initial facts. Her explanation, readily offered, leaned on Mark's supposed pre-existing health issues. Springfield police talked to Diane Staudte, and she had said, well, he's not been in the best of health. According to Diane's carefully curated account, Mark had reportedly been suffering from a prolonged period of vague illness over the preceding few days, presenting with symptoms that could easily be misinterpreted or attributed to a common ailment. And according to Diane, he hadn't been feeling well for the last few days. Mark had flu-like symptoms. He had not been eating. He had been feeling weak and kind of had gone downhill for those few days. These were generic, unspecific ailments that could, indeed, explain a natural, albeit sudden, decline. His bandmates and other acquaintances within the community corroborated, to a certain extent, that Mark had not appeared entirely robust recently. Some of his friends in the band and other people in the community noticed he seemed a little pale, complexion a little sallow. His skin was kind of yellowish color. These observations, consistent with the effects of an undisclosed illness, further lent credibility to Diane's narrative. One friend even recounted his concern. So I told him, I said, man, I need to take you to the doctors. Yet, according to Diane, Mark had inexplicably, perhaps stubbornly, ignored the advice. Mark Staudte, as depicted by Diane and supported by certain common male archetypes, was portrayed as a man disinclined to seek medical attention, embodying a self-assured, almost fatalistic nonchalance regarding his own well-being. Mark Staudte was one of those guys. Like so many men are, I'm fine. Everything will be okay. I'm just feeling a little under the weather, a little indigestion. Whatever the precise nature of Mark's purported illness, Diane emphatically stated that on Sunday morning, Easter morning, Mark had flatly refused to get out of bed. Her account continued to shape the unfolding narrative. She said that she asked Mark to go to Easter Sunday church. When According to Diane, he declined this invitation to attend their communal worship. She made a deliberate choice to allow her husband to rest, a decision that she ostensibly expressed deep regret over upon her return home. According to Diane, when he declined, she decided to let her husband rest, a decision she regretted as soon as she got home from church and found him still in bed. Her recounting of the grim discovery was vivid and theatrical, designed to convey profound shock and grief. She goes, "I shook him first. He didn't move. So I pulled the covers and I shook him again, and I touched him. I knew he was dead." The sequence of her actions, carefully described, aimed to establish her shock and immediate realization of his demise. Mark's numerous friends and extended family members, while deeply grieved by news of his death, were, perhaps surprisingly, not necessarily surprised. Their lack of surprise was rooted in a pre-existing awareness of Mark's lifestyle choices and a subtle, generalized understanding of his health. He was 60, overweight, had nutrition, didn't work out. His outward appearance and known habits lent themselves to a seemingly plausible explanation for sudden death. His lifestyle, smoking, things of that nature that might have contributed to his death, were factors readily accepted by many. Indeed, this commonly held belief aligned perfectly with the initial professional assessment. That was the medical examiner's conclusion. It was determined that Mark died of natural causes. The official cause of death, declared with bureaucratic certainty, seemed to close the case. They said he died of a heart attack. Notably, no autopsy was done, a critical omission that would later haunt the investigators, leaving a significant investigative blind spot. Swiftly following the official pronouncement, Diane made a decisive choice regarding Mark's remains. Diane had Mark's body cremated. This act, while entirely common and often a deeply personal family decision, irrevocably eliminated any future opportunity for forensic examination, a point of deep psychological significance. A small, private ceremony was subsequently held by Lake Springfield, a poignant setting for remembrance, where his ashes are scattered to the wind. A larger, more public memorial service was held at the church, Diane's spiritual home, where she conspicuously asked the surviving members of Mark's beloved band to take a prominent role. She approached the band and asked if we would perform one of Mark's favorite hymnal songs. During this public service, Diane continued to project an image of stoic strength and admirable fortitude, skillfully concealing her immense, yet private, grief. My impression of Diane was that she's trying to be strong for the family. And once the emotional service concluded, Diane continued to manage her family as best as she could, ostensibly buoyed by a modest, yet significant financial influx. And once it was over, Diane continued to do the best she could for the family, with a little help from Mark's insurance. There's about $20,000 that goes to Diane after Mark dies. This sum, while not exorbitant, provided a cushion, a subtle, pragmatic benefit derived from a profound loss. It was not much, perhaps just enough for Diane to move the children out of the house where their father died. This change of residence, described as a strategic move to a newer area and a little bit bigger home, outwardly appeared to be a compassionate effort by Diane to mitigate the pervasive grief and psychological trauma for her surviving children. Diane was making sure their family had a slightly better life after the tragic loss of her husband. This act of relocation, viewed through a sympathetic lens, served to reinforce her image as a diligent, caring mother striving to protect her family in the wake of adversity. Her actions seemingly selfless and rooted in profound care. Mark's death profoundly affected his family, with the couple's youngest daughter still navigating the complexities of middle school, particularly struggling with the immense loss of her father. Mark's death hit the couple's youngest daughter hard. She was still in middle school when her father died. It was very sad. It just was tragic. This early exposure to profound grief cast a palpable shadow over her formative years. 21-year-old Rachel, However, Diane's middle daughter demonstrated remarkable resilience amidst the sudden and devastating loss of her father, continuing to excel academically at Missouri State University. Her talents were multifaceted and deeply impressive. Several of her teachers talked about what a wonderful writer she is, how she appreciated the intrinsics of math, how she was able to do art, not just painting or sketching, but three-dimensional art, sculptures. Her accomplishments were a testament to her innate intelligence and her relentless drive, and she did it effortlessly. In stark contrast, older sister Sarah, who was also a student at Missouri State, continued to grapple with significant academic difficulties, her struggles exacerbated by the profound familial upheaval. Older sister Sarah, who was also a student at Missouri State, continued to struggle, though. Sarah was nice, but not as driven. She wasn't hugely successful in honors and making the dean's roll. Her academic path was a consistent source of stress for her, and implicitly for Diane. But it was Diane's eldest child, her son Sean, whose autism and existing medical challenges particularly had the hardest time dealing with his father's death. Sean's expressions of grief were raw, unfiltered, and deeply poignant. Appearing publicly on social media, Diane Staudte is on Facebook making statements like, "Well, now my dad's gone and nobody's ever going to remember him. I wonder what's going to happen to me." These were desperate, profoundly vulnerable questions from a young man grappling with profound loss and existential uncertainty, his social media posts serving as a poignant cry for help, a visible demonstration of his acute emotional distress and his dependency on the family unit, now severely fractured. The harrowing answer to Sean's unsettling question arrived with a chilling, almost prescient swiftness a mere 5 months after Mark's death, when Diane, with an unsettling familiarity, made yet another desperate call to emergency services, 911. The answer came on September 2nd, 5 months after Mark's death, when Diane made another desperate call to 911. Police units were swiftly dispatched to the Staudte residence, their arrival mirroring the scene that had transpired just months prior. Police were dispatched to the Staudte residence. Upon entering the home, they were confronted with a deeply disturbing discovery. When they arrive, they find Sean deceased in his bedroom. The stark reality of Sean's death, a cruel echo of his father's passing, cast an immediate and profound pall over the family, yet again. And, according to Diane's detailed and precise account, the circumstances surrounding Sean's death were eerily similar to his father's death 5 months earlier, an observation that would later raise profound and disquieting questions for investigators. Sean had flu-like symptoms as well, nausea he'd been throwing up. The insidious, generalized symptoms mirrored Mark's, a detail that now appeared far too coincidental. And just like Mark, Sean had ostensibly passed away while the rest of the family was in church that Sunday morning, a timing that once again deflected any immediate suspicion from Diane. Diane maintained, with a veneer of consistent concern, that she had checked on Sean before she left, and he was okay. However, upon her return, she made the devastating, almost theatrical discovery. When she comes back, she finds her son, Dad, on the floor of his bedroom. This scene, meticulously described by Diane, was presented as a re-traumatizing echo of her earlier loss. The haunting question now began to press upon the edges of possibility, its silent insistence growing louder. Was there some connection? At first glance, the young man's sudden and inexplicable death, especially for an individual in his mid-20s, appeared, ostensibly, to be a perplexing medical mystery. Here's a man in his mid-20s who should be in the prime of his life, even if he had had the flu. This biological anomaly, a sudden demise at such a vibrant age, defied easy explanation, even with a seemingly minor illness. But investigators, with a cautious pragmatism, also considered Sean's known medical vulnerabilities. But was that really the case? Sean had medical issues, a history of autism. He had a history of seizures. His pre-existing conditions offered a seemingly plausible, alternative explanation for his sudden death. Indeed, his death presented physical evidence that hinted at a familiar, yet ultimately misleading, 'cause it looked as if he might have had one recently, too. He had blood around his mouth. Was this grim detail unequivocally evidence of seizure? That was, indeed, the initial expert medical opinion that provided a comforting, naturalistic explanation for his untimely demise. That's what the medical examiner believed. The neuropathologist did find that based upon the findings of the autopsy, as well as the history of medical issues, which included seizures, that his death was initially ruled a death by natural causes. The official ruling, like Mark's, closed the case with a perceived certainty of medical science, once again diverting any immediate suspicion from foul play and, crucially, from Diane. Less than 6 months after the unexpected passing of Mark, friends and family, with a somber, familiar cadence, filed into Diane's church once again for another agonizing memorial service. The profound sense of repetitive loss, the cruel echoes of recent tragedy, permeated the hallowed space. I liked Sean. He was a quiet kid and a nice kid, a friend eulogized. Words that painted a picture of a gentle soul gone too soon. The Staudte family would, with heavy hearts, once again be confronted with the grim ritual of scattering ashes, a stark physical representation of irretrievable loss. Diane had Sean cremated as well. This second act of cremation, mirroring her decision for Mark, effectively eliminated another crucial opportunity for future forensic re-examination, a decision that would later attract intense scrutiny. And for a second time in an agonizingly short span, Diane and her surviving daughters would struggle, publicly at least, to move on as best they could after a terrible tragedy. The communal narrative, firmly established, revolved around profound sympathy. People thought she's lost her husband, she's lost her son, this poor woman. It's a good thing that she has the love of her 3 daughters. The outpouring of collective empathy from her church and wider community provided Diane with an impenetrable shield, safeguarding her from any nascent suspicion. Diane also had the support of her church family coalesced around her. They were her family to bring her through this time of grief. This strong spiritual network served as a powerful and unwavering source of comfort, a bastion of solace. And it was a source of comfort, not just to Diane, but also to her remaining children, providing a much-needed anchor in the churning waters of their profound sorrow. Indeed, after enduring the compounding tragedies of losing both her beloved father and her cherished brother, middle daughter Rachel, seeking an anchor in the storm of grief, also found deep and abiding solace in the comforting rituals and spiritual community of religion. To Diane and Rachel, church seemed to be probably the biggest part of their life. Their mutual devotion was unwavering, a shared commitment that fortified their mother-daughter bond. If church was open, they were going to be there, and they were going to be involved in it. This spiritual symbiosis painted an outward picture of shared faith and moral rectitude, obscuring any nascent darkness. Eldest daughter Sarah, on the other hand, reacted to the cascade of familial tragedies by throwing herself with determined vigor into her academic pursuits. And remarkably, despite enduring years of grappling with significant academic struggles, a persistent challenge that had long defined her scholastic journey, she finally managed, against considerable odds, to successfully graduate in 2012. She had a degree in French. This hard-won academic achievement, a testament to her perseverance, offered a fleeting yet profoundly significant bright spot after a year of tragedy. For Sarah, obtaining her degree was more than a mere qualification. It was a deeply personal accomplishment. She was very proud about going to college and getting her degree. That was something that she wanted to do for a while. However, while she had at long last achieved her long-hoped-for academic milestone, Sarah's ongoing struggles were far from over. Her professional future, particularly in the seemingly limited job market of southwest Missouri, presented a new, formidable set of challenges, since there wasn't exactly a big demand for French translators in southwest Missouri. Her newly acquired degree, while a source of personal pride, did not immediately translate into tangible employment prospects. Once Sarah graduates college, she's not really sure what she's going to do. This vocational uncertainty, this lingering question mark over her professional future, weighed heavily upon her, adding another layer of existential anxiety. Yet, tragically, this vocational uncertainty would not, for very long, remain the 24-year-old's most pressing or profound worry. For in a sinister, chilling echo of the past, a terrible pattern began to repeat itself with devastating and inexplicable swiftness. Although that wouldn't be the 24-year-old's biggest worry. It's not too long after that. Sarah starts to not feeling well, and the symptoms were all too familiar. This ominous reemergence of previous symptoms, so painfully reminiscent of Mark's and Sean's final days, heralded a fresh, terrifying crisis, shattering any remaining illusions of accidental misfortune and raising the chilling specter of deliberate, cold-blooded malice. The repetitive, haunting echo of illness within the same family now moved beyond coincidence into the terrifying realm of criminal pattern. The narrative pauses here, poised at the precipice of profound, terrible revelation, intensifying the reader's anxiety and intellectual engagement with the chilling question. Coming up, had Sarah attempted suicide? She's talked about in the past about cutting her wrist, or is her mysterious illness no coincidence? To believe that something like this could go on in our town. It was shocking. The deliberate rhetorical questions and the community's stunned disbelief strategically heightened the psychological tension. This interlude, a moment of dramatic pause, allowed the discerning criminal psychology analyst to reflect deeply on the stark, bewildering dichotomy presented. The tragic, empathetic narrative of a perpetually suffering family versus the insidious, terrifying possibility of an unfolding, familial horror orchestrated by a deeply disturbed perpetrator, the seemingly kind, church-going woman Diane, whose life had been outwardly shaped by selfless nursing and devout piety, now stood at a chilling crossroads, her perceived role oscillating between victim and potential monster. On the 9th of June 2013, in an unsettling and chilling echo of past traumas, 51-year-old Diane Staudte, her composure seemingly intact amidst the rising panic, once again found herself frantically rushing her daughter, Sarah, to the emergency room of a hospital in Springfield, Missouri. The scene was eerily reminiscent of her previous trips, triggering a profound sense of déjà vu for the medical staff who encountered the family once more. The 24-year-old Sarah, Diane's eldest daughter, had fallen mysteriously and gravely ill. Her condition, plummeting with alarming swiftness, was nothing short of dire. She is in critical condition. She is as close to dying. The medical prognosis was grim. Hanging heavy and suffocatingly in the sterile air of the emergency ward, despite the valiant and concerted efforts of the dedicated medical team, the doctors found themselves utterly bewildered, utterly unable to identify the elusive cause of Sarah's rapid and terrifying deterioration. And despite all their best efforts, the doctors had no idea why. They couldn't figure out the doctors didn't know what was going on. This is a medical mystery. The perplexing ambiguity of her illness, the frustrating absence of a clear diagnosis, only intensified the sense of profound dread, and in a chilling, almost despairing prognosis, the stark reality set in. If the doctors could not unravel this perplexing medical puzzle in time, the outcome was grim. It appeared that Sarah was not going to survive. Her vital organs, one after another, seemed to be systematically shutting down under the onslaught of an unknown assailant within her own body. Her kidneys may fail. It appears to be that sort of systemic organ failure. The thought of losing a daughter so young, so suddenly, was, on its own, a truly devastating prospect for any parent. But for Diane, this potential tragedy would mark a horrifying and unprecedented milestone. It would be the third such immense tragedy she had endured, or overtly claimed to endure, in little more than a single, agonizing year. And as devastating as losing a daughter, so young might be, it would be the third such tragedy that Diane had suffered in little more than a year. The sheer accumulation of loss, its unrelenting brutality, pushed the limits of human endurance and statistical probability. There had been two preceding, equally inexplicable deaths that had ravaged Diane's immediate family. Her husband, Mark, had tragically died first in April of 2012. Merely months earlier, his death had been officially attributed by the medical examiner to what was believed to be a heart attack. The explanation, while sorrowful, had been outwardly logical and easily comprehensible, fitting a pattern of a man who neglected his health. Mark was a little bit overweight, and he was 60. His known lifestyle factors seemingly provided a tidy explanation, deflecting any deeper scrutiny. The subsequent death of Diane's son, Sean, who had passed away a mere 5 months after his father, had also, for a time, been just as easy to explain, framed within the context of his complex medical history. The 26-year-old had a long history of seizures. The medical consensus had attributed his passing to these pre-existing conditions. The autopsy determined that he had died of natural causes due to a prior medical situation. The narrative presented to community was one of an unfortunate series of natural, albeit profound, misfortunes. But now, with Sarah teetering on the brink of death, the disquieting question that had perhaps subtly gnawed at the edges of communal consciousness could no longer be silenced. But were the deaths just a terrible coincidence? This question, imbued with both scientific skepticism and profound unease, finally found voice. On June 11th, while Sarah remained in a precarious, fragile state of critical care within the intensive care unit, a crucial and anonymous call pierced the comforting veil of community unquestioning trust, shattering the illusion of merely tragic coincidences. On June 11th, while Sarah was in the ICU, someone called the police. The anonymous caller expressed a profound and urgent concern. They were very alarmed by some things going on in the Staudte family. This call, a spark in the darkness, lit the slow-burning fuse of a formal investigation. Initially, the community had extended an outpouring of sincere empathy. The first member of the family dying, I'm sure that everyone was just heartbroken for them. But the narrative of repeated sorrow, of unrelenting misfortune, gradually began to shift perception, giving rise to disquieting doubt. When Sean died, a second member of the same family, I'm sure that there were probably some people wondering how in the world could so much tragedy happen to one family. And now, with the chilling recurrence of severe, inexplicable illness within the same beleaguered household, and then when Sarah became sick, people had to start getting suspicious. The accumulation of misfortune, once pitted, was now viewed with profound and escalating skepticism, the human mind instinctively searching for patterns, for causes beyond mere fate. Although the anonymous caller had only suspicions to offer, the sheer repetition of similar calamities within one family demanded immediate attention from law enforcement. The tip, while vague in its specifics, was direct in its plea. The tip was just simply asking the police to look into the deaths as well as what is happening with Sarah. This single call ignited a profound question, hanging heavy in the air of investigation. Was there some connection? The task of unraveling this chilling enigma fell squarely upon the shoulders of Springfield Police. Detective Neil McCamus, a man whose methodical approach and keen eye for detail would prove crucial. His initial steps were meticulously strategic. The first thing I did was to go back and locate the reports in reference to Mark's passing along with Sean's. What Detective McCamus uncovered through this diligent review of past, seemingly disparate records was not only alarming but profoundly disturbing. And what the detective found was alarming. There was a lot of similarities in such a short time. Period for these people to be becoming so ill, and then with the 2 passings that had definitely raised some red flags. The eerie congruence of symptoms and the unsettling rapidity of the deaths could no longer be dismissed as simple statistical outliers. They now strongly suggested a sinister underlying pattern. But if such a profound and deeply concerning pattern existed, why had it remained unaddressed, unnoticed, a mere 9 months earlier when Sean, Diane's son, had tragically passed away? Detective McCamus considered the complexities inherent in such an elusive criminal pattern. Part of it may have been that the deaths occurred at 2 different homes. The geographical separation of the deaths, occurring in distinct residences, served to inadvertently mask the insidious link between them, preventing a single officer or responder from immediately connecting the dots. Unless you really knew the family or knew the last name or had been on both calls, there'd be no way to really link them together. This organizational and logistical separation inadvertently provided a chilling veil of plausible deniability, hindering early detection. And if the unsettling similarities in symptoms and the perplexing circumstances surrounding both, Mark and Sean's deaths were already profoundly troubling for the investigators. What they subsequently heard from the medical professionals at the hospital, caring for the desperately ill Sarah, was equally, if not more, disturbing. They find some suspicious nurses and some suspicious doctors who say Diane Staudte is acting. Strange. These seasoned medical professionals, individuals attuned to the nuances of human behavior in moments of acute crisis, offered observations that clashed jarringly with the expected maternal grief and distress. Diane's not really being too concerned. This observed nonchalance, this perplexing emotional detachment from her daughter's dire, life-threatening condition, immediately raised a cacophony of internal alarms within the hospital staff. What's more, rather than displaying appropriate, singular focus on her daughter's precarious state, Diane's most pressing preoccupation, disconcertingly, appeared to be her impending summer vacation. Rather than her daughter's condition, Diane's biggest concern seemed to be her upcoming summer vacation. Diane had spoken about going on vacation regardless of whether Sarah was better or not. This alarming deflection, this seemingly callous disregard for her daughter's suffering, struck the medical staff as deeply abnormal, profoundly chilling, and utterly inexplicable, given the circumstances. Was Diane, the pious nurse, simply attempting to maintain a stoic, brave front, shielding her profound grief from public view? Some offered potential psychological explanations, attempting to rationalize her disturbing demeanor. Some people say, well, she's a nurse, she's used to death, and you have to laugh to get through terrible things in life. The psychological defense mechanism of dark humor, a coping strategy, was put forward as a possibility. Or a far more chilling interpretation surfaced. Had she already psychologically written her daughter off as dead, having processed the grief in advance? An insidious form of anticipatory grief that morphed into cold detachment? She seemed so incredibly cold and indifferent to what was happening. Whatever the underlying psychological or emotional rationale for Diane's disconcerting nonchalance, the irrefutable fact that she was a trained nurse undeniably raised a chilling, insidious possibility for the investigators. Her professional background, rather than inspiring trust, now served to amplify a terrifying new line of inquiry. Diane, being a nurse, she might have knowledge of something that could have been done to these people. Her medical expertise, her deep understanding of human physiology and pharmacology, suddenly appeared not as a source of compassion, but as a potential weapon, a chilling tool for murder and concealment. This insidious suspicion, a horrifying paradigm shift in thinking, was terrifyingly corroborated by Sarah's attending physician. It was a suspicion Sarah's doctor shared. The doctor suspected that it was a possible poisoning. The pronouncement, delivered by a medical professional whose life was dedicated to healing, was nothing short of devastating. Could this seemingly devout, hard-working wife and mother truly be capable of such monstrous acts, cold-blooded murder of her? husband her son, and a calculated attempt on the life of her own daughter? The sheer depravity of the notion, the profound violation of deeply ingrained societal norms, was almost too much for the detectives, hardened as they were, to process. It was almost too much for the detectives to believe that something like this could go on in our town. It was shocking. Just hard to understand how a mother could do that. The cognitive dissonance, the chasm between her outward persona and the terrifying reality, was vast and profoundly disturbing, shaking the very foundations of their understanding of human evil. As difficult as it was to psychologically and morally believe that a mother could commit such horrific acts, the even more formidable challenge facing law enforcement was undeniably one of concrete proof. And as hard as it was to believe, it might be even harder to prove. The investigative hurdles were immense and daunting. Both Mark and Sean had, tragically and crucially, been cremated, an irreversible act that, at the time, was seemingly innocuous but had, in hindsight, obliterated vital physical evidence, sealing away any direct pathological examination of their remains. Moreover, attempting to meticulously locate traces of subtle poison within Sarah's system presented its own, unique and formidable difficulties. And finding traces of poison in Sarah's system would be difficult. Sarah's body had been purged at pretty much everything and try and get her back to life. The aggressive medical interventions designed to save her life, while necessary, would inadvertently complicate the search for a foreign agent. Her system, a battleground of therapeutic efforts, would likely have eliminated much of the immediate evidence of any toxins. However, amidst these profound challenges, a flicker of forensic possibility, a narrow window of opportunity, presented itself. There was one possibility, however, and it hinged entirely on the foresight and standard procedures initiated at the time of Sean's autopsy. With Sean Staudte, they did do an autopsy, and they saved tissue samples. These meticulously preserved tissue samples, a tiny archive of his bodily truth, now represented the last best hope for unlocking the chilling medical mystery that plagued the Staudte family. After diligently consulting with Sarah's attending doctors, meticulously reviewing the perplexing and terrifying constellation of her symptoms, the investigators immediately contacted the medical examiner's office. Their urgent request was for a new and rigorous analysis of the invaluable tissue samples, meticulously preserved from Sean's original autopsy, now viewed through a dramatically altered and deeply suspicious lens. So, after consulting with Sarah's doctors about her symptoms, the investigators contacted the medical examiner's office and asked for a new analysis of the samples from Sean's autopsy. The attending doctor, now suspecting a malevolent hand, offered preliminary hypotheses regarding the nature of the poison. The doctor thought it was some type of heavy metal or possibly arsenic poisoning, but he did not know. This speculative yet chilling insight narrowed the forensic search considerably, giving the specialized labs a clear direction. And even as the investigators waited with palpable tension for the medical examiner's office to painstakingly track down the precise samples for the crucial testing, a glimmer of welcome, miraculous news reached them, lifting a portion of the pervasive dread. And even as the investigators waited for the medical examiner's office to track down the samples for testing, they received some welcome news. Sarah Staudte starts to get better. She made a miraculous recovery. This sudden and profound improvement in her condition, while defying all previous medical prognosis, reinforced the chilling possibility of an external, rather than natural, cause for her illness. Often, poison victims show signs of recovery once removed from the source. But while Sarah was miraculously no longer in danger of dying, her ordeal had taken an immense toll on her physical and cognitive abilities. She remained seriously ill. Her weakened state significantly hampered her ability to communicate, fully or clearly. I was able to speak with her a couple times, but due to the condition that she was in, it was difficult to get information from her. This meant that direct testimony from the victim was not yet fully available, increasing the pressure on the investigators to secure other forms of evidence. Therefore, on the 20th of June, a mere 10 days after she had first, ostensibly in a panic, rushed Sarah to the hospital, the investigators made a decisive, calculated move. It was time, they determined, for a direct and unvarnished conversation with Diane herself. The intricate, horrifying pattern demanded answers, and Diane was undeniably at its epicenter. So on June 20th, 10 days after she'd first rushed Sarah to the hospital, the investigators decided it was time to talk to Diane. They issued a formal request, asking her to come into the police headquarters to answer some questions, a location that, by its very nature, signals a significant escalation in scrutiny. To their professional observation, and perhaps to their initial surprise, she agreed to do that. She drove herself to police headquarters. This willing compliance, this almost placid agreement, underscored her deep self-assurance and her masterful ability to project an image of blamelessness. The initial greeting, framed with courteous professionalism, conveyed a deliberate softening of the interrogation environment. "I appreciate you being willing to come down and speak with us. You've been very helpful in your apartment. Don't try to be." The psychologist observes her immediate psychological stance. From the very outset of the interview, Diane Staudte maintained an almost unnerving composure. Diane was very calm. She was extremely calm. Her outward serenity, even under the intense scrutiny of a police interrogation room, was a striking psychological phenomenon, an eerie stillness that belied the monumental gravity of the conversation. This unshakable calmness persisted even as it became increasingly, undeniably clear to her that the investigators harbored profound suspicions linking Sarah's sudden, devastating illness directly to the earlier, tragically similar deaths of her son and her husband. The pattern was now too stark to ignore. In response to these unvoiced yet palpable suspicions, Diane subtly yet adroitly deflected, presenting herself as equally baffled by the sequence of misfortunes. She said that she had tried to come up with all these different theories. This intellectualized approach, this analytical posturing, attempted to align her with the investigative process, framing herself as a bewildered participant in a shared enigma. She leveraged her professional background, deftly invoking her nursing expertise as a shield against culpability. She discussed her nursing background and what could have happened. Her medical knowledge, previously seen as a potential tool for crime, was now presented as a tool for understanding the very medical mystery that perplexed everyone. "So this is as much a medical mystery to you as it is for the doctors and what you're saying." Her response, delivered with an almost placid certainty, sought to eliminate herself from suspicion. "I have no clue." However, beneath this veneer of mystified ignorance, a subtle yet chilling narrative shift began to emerge. Diane subtly hinted at a profoundly disturbing possibility regarding Sarah's current predicament, the potential for self-inflicted harm. Although she did hint that Sarah's illness might have been self-inflicted, with an unsettling casualness, she dropped a bombshell, providing what she likely intended as a convincing, if horrifying, alternative explanation for her daughter's condition. She's talked about in the past about cutting her wrists. This calculated revelation, deftly introduced Inspector Suicide, was a masterful manipulation, designed to deflect culpability and reframe Sarah's suffering. She opened suggesting that it may have been a suicide. This narrative, she implied, stemmed from Sarah's increasing difficulties and the burden she herself had placed upon her. "Daughter, I've been kind of putting pressure on her to, you need to get out and get a job. Your college bills are coming due." Sarah, struggling to find her footing in a competitive world, carried this mountain of student debt, a financial burden that Diane explicitly stated she wished to be rid of. Her resentment was palpable, debts that Diane didn't want to be stuck with. After all, you get tired doing everything for your kids, and it's like you need to step up and do it. This casual articulation of resentment towards her own child for not being self-sufficient provided a chilling glimpse into Diane's pragmatic, almost mercenary, internal landscape. Yet, despite her unsettling suggestion that Sarah had attempted suicide, Diane steadfastly claimed a profound ignorance regarding the precise methods her daughter might have employed to achieve such a desperate end. This claim, presented as an earnest lack of knowledge, was itself a form of carefully constructed defense. But if Sarah had attempted suicide, Diane said she didn't know how her daughter had done it. When pressed about the availability of medications, she offered a dismissive, minimal inventory of typical household drugs. As far as pills, I don't have much. You know, Tylenol, Motrin, that type of stuff. This seemed an attempt to deflect attention from any easily accessible poisons within the home. But then, as of an innocuous afterthought, a deeply chilling and potent possibility was introduced by Diane herself, seemingly innocent, yet fraught with immense, terrible implication. Anything else maybe besides pills that she could do? Well, she got into like cleaners and stuff like that. But I don't know. I can't really picture her doing that. The suggestion of common household cleaners, deceptively benign substances that can be lethally toxic, subtly shifted the investigative focus, preparing the ground for what would come next. And then, with an almost imperceptible, yet profoundly significant pause in her narrative, Diane herself, the supposedly baffled mother, introduced a very specific and ultimately damning substance that lay at the heart of the horrifying family tragedies. However, there was one last possibility. The pause, subtle as it was, created a deliberate vacuum of attention, focusing the detectives precisely on her next revelation. There's antifreeze. It's a poison. It is not an immediate death, but it can be a death over a several-day period. This statement, delivered with a detached, clinical accuracy, was a bombshell. How did she, an allegedly unknowing mother, possess such precise and intimate knowledge of antifreeze's delayed lethality? Her explanation was convoluted, yet artfully designed to sound like a natural confession from a distressed mother. She recounted a heated argument with Sarah, linking it directly to the discovery of antifreeze. We had been arguing, and she got really mad at me. And I told her, for all the stuff that you put me through, blah, 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 blah. And I think she went out in the garage. The subtle implication was that Sarah, in a fit of despair following the argument, had then consumed the poison herself. A suicidal act triggered by her mother's frustration and Sarah's own perceived failings. However, Detective McCamus, a seasoned professional well-versed in the subtle art of deception, recognized a cunning misdirection. He honed in on the glaring flaw in Diane's rapidly constructed suicide narrative. If Sarah had indeed attempted suicide by ingesting antifreeze, how did that logically, plausibly explain the death of her father, Mark, and her brother, Sean, both of whom had died under strikingly similar circumstances, presenting with nearly identical, insidious symptoms only months earlier? The repetition of circumstance now screamed a pattern of malevolence, not coincidence or despair. The very question seemed to challenge the logical framework of Diane's defense. But if Sarah had tried to commit suicide, why had her father and brother both died under such similar circumstances? With a profound, chilling twist, Diane offered a response, attempting to weave a fabric of shared, inexplicable suicide into the horrific narrative. According to her, with an almost unbelievable, audacious claim, it was because they'd all been drinking antifreeze. The very audacity of Diane's statement, suggesting that all three family members had, independently yet concurrently, chosen the same esoteric method of self-destruction, ingesting antifreeze, was met with deep and justifiable skepticism by the investigators. Her claim strained the very bounds of credulity. Detective McCamus, refusing to be swayed by her cunning and psychologically manipulative narrative, directly challenged her with an insight born of keen analytical thinking and emerging evidence. How'd you know they were drinking antifreeze, Diane? They told them. Diane's reply, attributing her knowledge to the alleged victims, was the final, transparent thread of her carefully constructed lie. The detective, with a measured calm that concealed a profound sense of outrage and undeniable certainty, directly exposed her manipulative deceit. You and I both know why you knew they were drinking antifreeze, and it didn't have a thing to do with suicide. You knew, Diane, that they were drinking antifreeze because you were giving it to them. The air in the interrogation room grew thick with the unspoken truth, the weight of the detective's accusation heavy and unavoidable. In that devastating moment, her carefully constructed facade of victimhood and pious ignorance finally shattered, exposing the horrifying, cold-blooded malice beneath. Confronted with the undeniable, penetrating truth, stripped bare of all her carefully orchestrated defenses and manipulative narratives, Diane, after a several-hour-long interview, finally succumbed to the overwhelming pressure and confessed. Diane did confess it was a several-hour-long interview, but she did end up confessing. The agonizing admission spilled forth, a torrent of horrifying truth. The initial, devastating query was blunt, cutting directly to the core of her monstrous acts. Who's the first person that you killed? Her response, delivered in the hushed, almost resigned tone of an exposed killer, was simple and chilling. Mark. She then proceeded, in a cold, almost detached recitation of her crimes, to recount how she had systematically poisoned her own son, Sean. The question, direct and piercing, sought the timeline of her unspeakable act. How many days was it that you started giving him antifreeze before he died? Maybe a couple of days. Just a couple of days, echoed the detective, the words painting a grim picture of calculated, slow-acting murder. And finally, with an unnerving lack of emotion, she admitted to the horrific attempt on her daughter Sarah's life, expressing a chilling surprise at Sarah's improbable survival. And she admitted to the attempt on Sarah's life, too. Are you surprised she was able to pull through? This guttural sound of surprise, this single, almost imperceptible spoke volumes about her psychopathic indifference to the lives she had sought to extinguish, her lack of control over the ultimate outcome, and her frustration at the unexpected resilience of her intended victim. By the agonizing conclusion of the extensive interview, the investigators had, undoubtedly, heard more than enough to act. With unwavering resolve and a profound sense of purpose, they placed Diane under arrest. The words, delivered with formal precision, marked the undeniable end of her reign of terror and deceit. If you can stand up for us, we have to put some handcuffs on me. We're not going to put them on tight. But I'm telling you, put your hands behind your back. Her whispered, almost casual reply, for now, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't. Remained cryptic, a final, faint echo of the psychological games she had played throughout. The investigators had, at last, secured a chilling confession, a powerful admission of guilt from the seemingly pious mother. Yet a subtle, disquieting question lingered in the analytical minds of Detective McCamus and his colleagues. Had this confession, despite its devastating scope, come too easily? This persistent intuition, often a valuable guide in complex criminal psychology, suggested that something more profound, something deeper and more insidious, might still be concealed beneath the surface of Diane's stark admission. Was it truly possible that Diane was attempting to protect someone else, deliberately shouldering the full burden of guilt to shield another perpetrator? This profound question strategically set the stage for a new, unexpected, and truly shocking twist in the unfolding narrative. The segment ends with an ominous premonition. Coming up, the investigators uncover a new twist. Do you recognize this? The journal was written several months before Mark and Sean were killed. But where will it point them? This just wasn't Mom involved. The chilling implication of this new evidence, particularly the existence of a premeditation document from several months before, pointed unequivocally toward a far more elaborate and profoundly disturbing conspiracy, suggesting an unimaginable level of shared familial malevolence that transcended even Diane's. Horrifying admissions. The analyst understood that a seemingly simple confession could sometimes be the most complex of deceptions, a calculated maneuver to control the narrative. By the morning of June 21st, 2013, a profound and heavy quiet settled over the Springfield, Missouri Police Department. Several hours had already elapsed since Diane Staudte, the 51-year-old mother of four, had, with an almost eerie composure, confessed to the systematic poisoning of 3 members of her own family. Her admissions, detailed yet chillingly dispassionate, spoke of a slow, insidious form of murder. You expected the antifreeze to, after they drank it, that it would be quick, and it would kill my wife. This quote, almost clinically recited from the perspective of an external observer, likely an interviewer, underscored Diane's grim expectation for the poison's swift, deadly efficacy. Detective McCamus, still grappling with the psychological intricacies of her confession, pondered the deeper motivations that finally compelled her to unburden herself. I really don't know why she decided to confess. Maybe she was worried about what everybody else was gonna think. The profound cognitive dissonance between her monstrous actions and her carefully constructed public persona, particularly her deep integration within the community, was stark. She was so heavily involved in church, a social bastion of moral rectitude that would be profoundly shaken by her exposed depravity. Whatever the complex psychological cocktail of fear, guilt, or strategic calculation that ultimately drove Diane's confession, that morning marked a formal escalation in the pursuit of justice. The Springfield, Missouri authorities, with a profound sense of duty and the grim weight of evidence, officially charged the 51-year-old mother of four with 2 counts of murder. The charges were specific and devastating, directly correlating with the sequence of her confessed crimes. One was for the April 2012 death of her husband, Mark. The first, systematic removal of a perceived burden. The other for poisoning her son, Sean, 5 months later. The second, deliberate act of extinguishing a life. It was just so bizarre for a woman to kill her own family in such an awful way. The very notion defied human comprehension, challenging fundamental understandings of maternal bonds and familial love. Furthermore, the charges extended beyond the achieved murders. She was also charged with the attempted murder of her daughter, Sarah Staudte. The 24-year-old, miraculously resilient, had managed to survive the attempt on her life, but remained seriously ill, bearing the lingering physical scars of her mother's murderous intent. Sarah Staudte's in the hospital for a long time, a poignant reminder of the enduring physical and emotional toll inflicted by her mother's cruelty. News of Diane's arrest sent shockwaves of disbelief and profound bewilderment throughout the close-knit community of Springfield and among her bewildered friends and family. The initial reaction was one of outright, visceral shock, an inability to reconcile the image of the pious, suffering widow with the reality of a cold-blooded killer. I was shocked because she was a widow. This deep-seated belief in her victimhood was profoundly shaken. I mean, she was a victim. She played it. A recognition of her masterful performance as the suffering martyr. I thought, how could this be? This is the picture-perfect family, everything. The idyllic facade, so carefully maintained, now crumbled into fragments, exposing a terrifying, hidden reality. There was no indications of any darkness or sinister activities, leaving a trail of profound cognitive dissonance and betrayal among those who thought they knew her best. However, of all the stunned reactions, no one appeared more shocked than Sarah's younger sister, 22-year-old Rachel Staudte. Her utter devastation, her inability to process the unfolding horror, was acutely observed. With her older sister Sarah still incapacitated by her severe illness, rendering her unable to provide coherent testimony or insight, and her youngest sister is still a minor, Rachel became a focal point for the investigators. They shrewdly recognized that Rachel, despite her profound grief, represented their most viable chance for a witness who could give them insight into the family situation. She was uniquely positioned to unlock the deeper, darker dynamics of the Staudte household. Rachel was the crown jewel of the family. She was the smartest one. Her intelligence, her keen observational skills, position her as a potentially invaluable source of information, capable of articulating the subtle psychological currents within the family. But when the investigators gently brought Rachel in for a statement shortly after her mother's arrest, expecting a coherent narrative, they were met with an entirely different, overwhelming reaction. Diane's middle daughter, confronted with the terrifying, inexplicable truth, completely broke down. The raw, visceral agony of her reaction, tears streaming down her face, gut-wrenching sobs racking her slender frame, resonated with profound, sympathetic understanding. Oh, God, it's a lot to process. I don't even know how you actually process that. To be honest with you, Rachel, oh, my God, the words expressed by the investigators underscored the sheer incomprehensibility of such a familial betrayal. Rachel's initial statement, overwhelmed by a torrent of unmanaged emotion, was an utter bust, providing little of substance beyond the raw outpouring of her trauma. The path to truth, it seemed, would need to circumvent her immediate emotional devastation, at least for the moment. Yet, even as Rachel's initial interview proved fruitless in its immediate objective, the diligent and meticulous search of the family's home, conducted that very same day, yielded an astonishing piece of evidence, an artifact that would, with chilling certainty, redirect the entire investigation in a dramatically new and profoundly unexpected direction. What the investigators meticulously found was a handwritten journal, a seemingly innocuous personal item that, upon closer inspection, proved to be an invaluable and horrifying record of premeditation and chilling foresight. And within its pages, one entry immediately caught their arm, a passage so disturbing it sent a palpable shiver down the spines of the experienced officers. The journal entry itself was meticulously dated June of 2011, a full several months before Mark and Sean were killed. This timing was critical. It bespoke a cold, calculated plan, not a spontaneous act of rage. And as the investigators meticulously explained to Diane when they, with deliberate psychological impact, brought her in for another round of questioning, the explicit contents of that journal entry were, in their sheer audacity and terrifying prescience, utterly explosive. The excerpt, recited verbatim, echoed like a death knell in the sterile interview room, directly implicating someone in the family's future demise. It's sad when I realize how my father will pass on in the next 2 months and how Sean, my brother, will move on shortly after. This chillingly prophetic entry, predating the actual deaths by a significant margin, shattered any remaining illusion of accidental misfortune or Diane's solitary guilt. It instantly created a new, profoundly disturbing question, demanding an immediate, unambiguous answer. One of Diane's daughters knew that she planned to poison Mark and Sean. But which one? The sheer weight of this revelation shifted the psychological landscape of the investigation, now expanding beyond Diane's singular culpability to a far more insidious and deeply unsettling familial conspiracy. Detective McCamus, presenting the irrefutable evidence, stated with an air of grim certainty, "We both know this is Rachel's writing." The identification of Rachel's distinctive handwriting transformed her from a traumatized victim witness into a chillingly aware accomplice. Confronted with the undeniable evidence of the journal, Diane, in a strategic maneuver aimed at ultimate protection, continued to cling to her solitary guilt, deflecting any implication of Rachel. This just wasn't Mom involved. Did she put any antifreeze into their drinks as well? No, it was only you. Her adamant insistence on being the sole perpetrator even in the face of such damning new evidence, bespoke a deep, almost pathological, need to shield Rachel from the consequences of their shared horrors. But was this persistent claim of singular culpability genuinely true, or was Diane, despite her monstrous admissions, still clinging to a desperate, twisted attempt to cover for her daughter? The psychological intuition of the investigators provided a stark and damning answer. Diane was never going to roll on her daughter. She was never going to give Rachel up. This powerful, almost primal maternal instinct, albeit perversely applied, presented a new challenge. However, the tenacious investigators were far from abandoning their pursuit of the full, unvarnished truth. In fact, even as they painstakingly continued their questioning of Diane, engaging in the complex psychological dance of interrogation, they simultaneously brought Rachel in for a separate round of intense, yet carefully managed, questioning. In fact, even as they talked to Diane, the investigators brought Rachel in for questioning, too. Crucially, rather than directly confronting her with the devastating evidence immediately, they commenced the interview by treating her, at least outwardly, as a witness, aiming to gently coax information rather than trigger another emotional shutdown. The investigators, employing a measured and empathetic approach, began by asking Rachel a general, less accusatory question designed to subtly probe her awareness and trigger her conscience. Did you ever have any suspicions about anything when your dad and brother and sister got sick? Rachel's initial response was a masterful display of feigned uncertainty and bewildered realization, skillfully conveying the emotional shock of an innocent, belated awakening. In hindsight now, no, I think on a yes, but God, it's hard to even imagine something like that. This wavering, seemingly conflicted response, peppered with genuine-sounding expressions of disbelief and difficulty, was designed to obscure her deeper, more active knowledge. It was a good act, Detective McCamus would later reflect, acknowledging the psychological skill involved in her deception. Her performance might even have successfully fooled the investigators had it not been for one single, irrefutable piece of evidence, the undeniable truth encapsulated within the handwritten pages of that journal. Armed with the irrefutable evidence of the journal, the investigators chose their moment, injecting it into the conversation with a quiet, yet devastating impact, allowing it silent. Chilling words to shatter Rachel's meticulously crafted facade. Do you recognize this? The stark, unadorned question, coupled with the visual presentation of the journal, demanded an immediate and visceral reaction. Rachel's initial, feigned bewilderment was fleeting, almost theatrical. What is that? A journal thing. A journal thing? The investigator echoed, the repetition underscoring the disingenuousness of her response. Whose journal? This direct, persistent inquiry finally forced Rachel to confront the undeniable truth, to claim ownership of her own dark creation. Mine, your journal, her soft, resigned admission, your journal, confirmed her authorship, unequivocally linking her to the prophetic, horrifying words. Rachel, now utterly stripped of her pretense of innocence, not only owned up to writing the journal entry, but also, under the overwhelming weight of the evidence and the profound pressure